Hey everybody, welcome to another episode. This is episode 24 of Life Unfiltered with Samuel Hunter. I, of course, am Samuel Hunter. It's been a minute. I know I try to be as consistent as I possibly can. Starting a new job and things like that, you have training, you have to figure things out, and so it takes a minute. And then when I do come up with the time to think of something, I have to formulate my thoughts, so to speak. So it takes a minute, especially. And I posted this earlier on Facebook. I posted it, especially when you speak off the cuff. When you speak off the cuff and nothing's scripted and you're delivering everything from here. You have to try to streamline that. Some people can't go on, like myself, and then there's censorship sensibilities to consider. So, a lot goes into this. So, I do apologize for the hiatus. However, did have a really good time. I went to Utah for training. Utah was quite an experience. Very beautiful place. Very beautiful place. I recommend a lot of people go there. Check it out. The Great Salt Lake apparently will not be great for too much longer. So do what you can. Get in there or get out there rather if you're ever in that area and check it out. So today's episode is about the ego. I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I was sitting in traffic the other day and I came to the realization, and it doesn't matter the statistics or what people officially say, um, using cell phones while driving is a huge problem as well. Huge issue when it comes to accidents. I mean, people on their cell phones, and that's the thing I hate the most, is pulling up next to somebody and they're completely engulfed in their phone. That drives me insane. And so there's that aspect of it. But then there's also the aspect of how people tend to drive with themselves in mind, if that makes sense. You can't have a situation where, or rather, I would say, a lot of us have ran into a situation where we're just trying to get from point A to point B, and there's someone weaving in and out of traffic, not using a blinker, not being considerate of someone else, and then we all are in our own minds about that sort of thing. We're all thinking about what's going on with us and how we perceive this situation. And then no one's inside of the car of the person that's doing all this. And so I tend to think, and this is the point I wanted to get back, the point I wanted to get back to, is I tend to think that 90% of the road rage incidents that occur are based on ego. I've fallen victim to this. I'm sure some of you others have as well. And so I'm sitting in traffic and I witness all sorts of things. I've gotten to the age where I have decided to keep my ego in check behind the wheel because you never know who you may come across. You never know what kind of day someone else is having. And this all goes back to when I talk about us being selfish in society. This is exactly the thing that I'm saying is that we're so consumed with what we have going on that we don't consider anything that the other person has happening. For instance, think about it. How many times have you had a half hour lunch break? Have you needed to hurry up and get to McDonald's and cut people off? I see it all the time. There are some of you that do that. Also, you can get something to eat. And the person you cut off could have been this close to losing everything. You yourself could have been this close to losing everything. All because you have a half hour lunch break. But then that spins into a whole bunch of things about why you have a half hour lunch break in the first place and how we work ourselves to oblivion in many cases. So that in and of itself is another topic we'll get to. But the point is that all of that got me to thinking about how much ego is involved in so many decisions and how it's a blessing and a curse. And so for us to talk about what an ego actually is, because I think that everybody's definition is subjective. And if you have an opinion on it, if you have something to say about it, please chime in. I would love to hear from you. Um, on the way home from work, I was trying to think about, okay, how would you describe ego? And I'm not talking about the official definition because, again, those things are subjective. But in layman's terms, I would venture to say that the ego is a conscious yet subconscious arbitrary emotional mechanism to validate our particular emotional state or need to win something. There's an official definition. I'm sure there is. I don't have time to look it up. You know what? I will. All right. I will. And then we're going to expand upon that because I would love to get into this. Ego definition. Okay. Okay, so according to the Oxford Dictionary, the ego is a person's sense of self esteem or self importance. The psychoanalysis to that would be the part of the mind that mediates between the conscious and the unconscious and is responsible for reality testing and a sense of personal identity. And see, that's very interesting because that is in every aspect of our lives, whether it be driving, whether it be at the McDonald's line. Perfect example. So I'm at the McDonald's line and I rarely eat McDonald's. I have my reasons for that. Um, I have a rather strict diet. Um, and so I don't think there's anything wrong with a cheat day. I don't think there's anything wrong with indulging, every now and then. So I'm deciding I'm wanting to get this meal, this fish meal at McDonald's. And so for some reason, I always seem to be the one that picks the wrong time to go to lunch, that picks the wrong time to go to a drive through. Like, I rarely do it as it is. I mean, a lot of you know I love to cook. I'd prefer not to eat fast food, but it happens. And so this was one of them days where it happened. So I go through the drive through, and I think the worst thing ever invented was the 2 lane drive through. Now, some of you might sit and go, oh, well, it makes it easier for everybody else because if there's a lot of people, there's 2 lanes. to utilize. But forget that. That makes it more complicated because, again, what follows with things like this? The ego. This is a perfect example. So I get to the speaker first. We're not talking about the shenanigans going on in front of me that is a whole nother show. But we're talking about me at the window. I'm at the window. I'm ordering the food. In the next lane, I see a car pull up. Now, I'm sitting there watching everything because here's the thing about me is I watch everything. I pay attention to as much as my brain can possibly keep up with. That may be a condition. I have no idea, but I can focus on a lot of different things going on at once. I know it's definitely called multitasking, but my brain works so I don't know how other people think to say that it works differently, but for me it just is on a whole nother level. Anyhow, so I'm sitting up here and I'm assessing this situation and I'm going, for some reason I feel like she's gonna dart in front of me. And so sure enough, she does. And in my mind I'm like, I ordered before her, you know. But they had to get in front. So as we get up to the window, the line completely stops. I mean, they're in front of me. There's about two cars in front of them. And it doesn't seem like it stops because it's super backed up, but it seems like it stops because there's a snag. Because by the time I get to the window to pay for it, the cashier on the inside says, "So, what did you have again?" And I was like, the fish meal. And she goes, "Oh, okay." And then she goes, "Okay, and here's the order." Or I pay for the order rather. And so then we, exchange the money, whatever like that. So I drive forward and then I get to the next window. It's about another 10 minutes. I believe I was in this line like maybe 30 minutes or so. I have to do that thing where I really have to think about how long it was because a lot of people, especially if you work in retail or work in the hospitality industry, people will complain and say, "Oh, I waited 20 minutes," and it literally was only 5 or maybe 7 minutes. So I just know that I waited longer than it should have taken after I'd already paid for the food, and then I get up there, and then they're confused about the order. They're confused about the order again, rather. So now that they're confused about the order, I'm very polite about it. I've worked in fast food. Some of you out there have worked with me. You guys understand what's going on. So I'm sitting up here and I'm looking at everything that's going on, and so that's when I figure out the girl in the Hyundai cut me off, and she actually jumped the order and didn't realize maybe that you necessarily being in front doesn't make you the winner in every single case. And so that's kind of how deep I thought about it, just because I was bored and I had nothing else going on. But then, like I said, that whole thought got me to thinking, was my ego involved at any point? I didn't react to anything, but my perception of it. But I didn't necessarily think that it was a situation of where she wanted to beat me. I thought it was a situation of she doesn't get how this process goes, you know. But I can say there was a time where I allowed my ego to get completely involved in a lot of decisions that have affected me almost to this day. And so when we talk about the ego, and these are things where A good example would be someone who always has to have the last word. I believe that there's a lot about the ego that shows up when something like that happens because people always have to feel like they're winning. Even the most petty of ways, even little arguments like that, even interactions with day-to-day people. And it gets what makes it more complicated is when we have other things going on in our lives. We have a lot going on. We've got kids, we've got jobs, we've got all this stuff going on, and we already feel like we're failing and we're losing at things. I mean, look at the housing market. Look at renting places. Look at car loans, trying to secure a small business loan, which, by the way, it's a lot easier to get a car loan than it is a small business loan, which is crazy to me. And so we look at all this stuff and we just want to win sometimes. We just want to win. And so we pick those little spots, you know, we pick those little spots to where, you know, we feel like we need to prevail. And so I guess my question to all of you is, are you humble enough to accept that you can't always win? That's a tough question. It's a tough answer. It's hard for me, even saying it to myself, even thinking about asking the audience. Do you really feel like you lost when it comes to certain things? What is it in us that will storm over people on a Black Friday? Actually, I don't even think that's a thing anymore. There's online ordering, and I feel like that doesn't happen anymore. But when it did happen, what makes us when domestic things happen, and when I say domestic, I don't mean like home domestic. I mean, road rage incidents. I mean, you know, people having a good time and someone takes something the wrong way, and I mean, incidents like that. What makes us go because he or she made me mad? So that's why I blah 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 blah. They offended me. They pissed me off, so I. That's ego. When you feel that way, that's ego. Where does that come from? I'm not saying I'm better than anybody. I certainly am not. I have had those emotions. And because I've had those emotions, I told you it's all about self examination. People don't want to face themselves. I will face myself, and I have seen some ugly things, to be completely honest. And it's taken me years to adjust, and I figured it out because this is how you get better. This is how you improve and you grow and you rise. And so, what makes us, for the sake of arbitrary things, because he disrespected me, he stepped on my shoes. That was a big thing, and like that. Why haven't I heard much about that anymore? Is that still a thing? Please let me know. I am sure it's there. There are situations that occur nowadays, But if anybody's from my generation, y'all will know that was a major thing growing up, is somebody stepping on your shoes. So if there's anybody out there that's from my day, let's talk about that. But that's crazy. But yeah, the whole point is just all the little things that we allow to put us in situations. I remember it was a situation at Walmart, and I want to say like 15 years ago or something like that. It was a while ago. And I was going to go cash a check. Yeah, that's how long ago it was. So maybe more than that. Anyway, I'm not going to be one of them people that dwells on how long it was rather than the actual point. The main point is that it was at a it was one of those things I thought about. So anyway, I'm at this Walmart and I'm going to go cash this check, and there's only one lane available, and that's a whole nother thing about Walmart, whatever. But there's one lane available, and I happen to come in at the same time another guy comes in. But from my perception, I honestly was like right in that spot before him. And I wasn't trying to beat him. I was already at a particular pace, if that makes sense. And he was trying to beat me, and he still lost. And even saying beating me, you see where the ego comes in at. But he proceeded to just go off, behind me about how I had cut him, and he felt a certain way about me cutting him, and I was like, well, I was just here, or whatever like that. And so he kept on and on about it, to the point that I felt like if I went on and on about it, it would become a thing over a spot. Really, and I don't have time for this. I had a whole lot going on. Oh my gosh, if anybody knows me from, back in my day, I had a lot going the fuck on. Seriously. And I did not have time to get in trouble. And so I let him take the spot. I was like, you know what? It's not even worth it. Just go ahead and, do what you need to do. And so he did. And so then he was like, oh, we good now. And, you know, I kind of felt like some dirt got kicked on my foot. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but I felt like I gave in, and it was like all that was ego. I don't know what that guy had in his pocket. I don't know what he was fully capable of, and was it really worth engaging in anything over a spot in line when I'm really not in a big hurry to begin with? And so the beauty of self examination is understanding that at some point we all have to deal with that ego. We all have to, you know, come across it at some point. Even with my family, I hold a lot of feelings about things, and I've recently reconnected with some members of my family, and it's been awesome. But I've decided to take the ego out and look at things for what they are, you know, and look at what they were, and be objective and understand that I'm older now. Again, and I've said in shows before, we can't always hold things, but we can always be mindful of our growth and keep that in mind. If you are on a path that is leading you to be more and to get more, and I'm not talking about financially, that's what a lot of people get caught up in. When you talk about the definition of wealth, the definition of wealth isn't necessarily how much money you got. It's, do you want for anything? You know, do you have everything you need? Wealth is defined in many different ways. And again, the ego is involved in that because some people aren't satisfied with the things that they have. They're not. We all know people like that. So when it comes to the ego, it'll be at a job. This person's out to get me. I have been there a bunch of times. I have been there. But like I said, as I've gotten older, it's just the hardest thing to admit to yourself is that you've screwed up in so many ways. That is one of the day to days when it comes to struggles that I deal with is thinking about all the things that I got wrong based on my ego. All the things I neglected. How I had to win. How I had to have the last word. How I couldn't allow someone else to do something. Ultimately, we all end up where we're supposed to be. And I have no issues with my life and with my growth and things like that. And if these things hadn't happened, I wouldn't be in a position of life where I am today, as I am as a person, you know, considering especially where I grew up and what I came from, you know, and what I've had to overcome. So I have had issues, or things rather, where I've had to put my ego in check in order to move forward. A lot of us don't have that in us, we really don't. And so we have to be careful because sometimes that is a very dangerous thing is when our ego takes complete control over us. And so I guess I would just venture to say that in the end, we really just need to be good to one another and consider one another's feelings. I mean, there's a lot of inconsideration, rather. There's a lot. There's a lot. And we see it day to day. And to me, it's a complete travesty. I won't go so far as to say it's like a collapse of society. A lot of people will sit and go, oh my gosh, the end times are here because of how we treat one another. We've always treated each other poorly. We always have as a species. I mean, we like to think that we're superior to animals. We like to think that, oh, because we have the ability to reason and build things, that we're above the ant, that we're above the cockroach. And those insects alone have more sophisticated societies than we could ever possibly imagine. and they'll outlast us. We're basically but a blip in the universe. Do you really want to spend your time in your life bickering over the inconsequential things? I certainly don't. I seen a statistic where it said all of us had 1 in 4 billion chance of being born. So if you think about it, like when the sperm reaches the egg, it's supposed to be one out of how many millions that make it. We are but a miracle of life, every single one of us. That's why I don't have time to hate people or not try to understand someone else's situation. I may not necessarily like it, but they are who they are, and I just don't think it's okay to hurt people. I would never advocate for that. But we're basically like an experiment, folks. And I don't think that I want to spend my energy being disgusted by my own kind, no matter what. Even though we do some deplorable things as a species. But really, in the grand scheme of things, we're still learning, still evolving. Which brings me to another question. Do y'all think that we're evolving physically as a species? Like, if anybody has any idea of any new body parts that are developing on people that science is baffled by, please let me know because we never hear about that. Like, we hear about how chimps are walking upright more and using tools and things, and it seems like everything around us is evolving and changing, but we're not. Are there any new model humans out there? If you have any input on that, feel free to jump in. Let me know. Because I would love to find out if we are evolving physically as a species. So, anyway, I've been glad to have this time with y'all. I'm going to get back more into doing more episodes. Like I said, getting used to a new job, getting this new schedule figured out, and things like that. I have to work things out as far as recording time and things that I have to take care of at home. Shout out to everybody who's watched and who's joined. I have seen my followers list grow by a few dozen people. It is small. I was not on Facebook for a really long time, and I really didn't focus on it too much. But pretty much since last October, I've been really more focused on it and things of that nature. So make sure you like, share, and subscribe the show. Again, this is Life Unfiltered with Samuel Hunter. Shout out to Brian Shanley, my brother from another mother and father, but basically my brother. Uh, Thanks for watching. We need to get a show started or get a show recorded rather. I would love that. You guys would love him. He's something else. It's been a day one, so we'd love to have him on. But anyway, y'all, to sum it up, let's be safe out there with one another. Let's take care of each other. Um, Yes, we all have stuff going on. We all have our own minds and things we have to focus on, but let's put things in their place and show some consideration to each other, and I promise it comes back. It really does. With that being said, have a good evening, y'all. Be safe. Peace out.